Good morning, and welcome to the live stream service of the First Unitarian Church of Hobart, Indiana. My name is John Halstead. We are a religious community of people with diverse beliefs and shared values. Our diverse beliefs are expressed in our 6 sources, and our shared values are expressed in our 7 principles, both of which can be found online. Together we strive to grow spiritually, build community, and live our values in the world. We are currently in search for a full-time minister. When we do not have a minister in the pulpit, we invite members or guests to share a special message with us. Today is one such Sunday. Our speaker today and our service leader is Reverend Ian Riddell. During this time of responsible social distancing, we are striving to maintain the authenticity of our services, so we want to draw your attention to several parts of our service today. The bell you heard ringing was our actual church bell, which was recorded by Bob Allen. The music you hear is recorded each week by our music director, Jeremy Jacobson. If you are willing and able, we invite you to leave your cameras on so your fellow participants can see you just as they would if you were physically present. There will be a time in the service when you will all be unmuted briefly to say good morning to one another. Normally we are streaming on Facebook and YouTube, but I don't believe we are today. Our service is recorded and made available for future viewing on Facebook, YouTube, and the church website. We have a few announcements today. We hope you all will join us at 3:30 p.m. today in person at the church for the dedication of our Black Lives Matter sign. Zoom has changed its security settings. You may have noticed that you're put into a waiting room today before you came into the service. All future meetings, you will need to use our password in order to get into the church meetings. This includes committee meetings as well as the services. The password is the Hobart zip code, 46342. If you have an announcement for Sunday worship regarding church or ministry or committee business, please submit no later than Friday to Maggie Reister. And also there is a new Spirit Circle Connections group, which Barb Langell has offered to host a Zoom group for women identified seniors Friday, October 2nd at 2 p.m. To participate, please contact Barb and she'll send you the Zoom link. If you're interested in hosting or co-hosting another group, please let Janet know, Janet French. And this information will be in the next upcoming as well. Our prayers and thoughts are with James Johnson and his family right now, as James's mother is very ill, and for Valerie Lambert as she recovers, as well as Pete over the loss of his friend Aaron, and with Aaron's family. Please take a deep breath now and join us in a spirit of reverence as we listen to our prelude. Please join us in our chalice lighting. The words are printed on your screen. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning in celebration of the life we share together.
Good morning. As we gather together this morning, we lift up the words of Ursula Le Guin, who wrote, "Love doesn't just sit there like a stone, it has to be made like bread, remade all the time, made anew." We share the sacred breath. We gather together to build the beloved community breath by breath, word by word, note by note. We gather together to sing and speak and dance and breathe the beloved community into being. This is our work. This is our calling. This is our joy.
Please join us now as we sing our opening hymn, Filled with Loving Kindness. I'd like to draw attention to the fact that this hymn was actually written by our guest minister today, Reverend Ian Riddell.
May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be
Please join us now in our affirmation of faith. The words are printed on your screen. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. Service is its prayer. And this is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and praise arise. Let peace, goodwill, all men be sung through every land and every region.
Now is the time for a story for all ages. Reverend Riddell will be reading our story from Real Love by Sharon Salzberg.
Our reading, as John said, is from Real Love by Buddhist teacher, writer Sharon Salzberg. I see a real love, she writes, as the most fundamental of our innate capacities, never destroyed, no matter what we might have gone through or might yet go through. It might be buried, obscured from view, hard to find and hard to trust, but it is there, faintly pulsing like a heartbeat beneath the words we use to greet one another. as we ponder how to critique others' work without hurting them, as we gather the courage to stand up for ourselves or realize we have to let go of a relationship. Real love seeks to find authentic life, to uncurl and blossom. I believe there is only one kind of love, real love, trying to come alive in us despite our limiting assumptions, the distortions of our culture, and the habits of fear, self-condemnation, and isolation that we tend to acquire just by living a life. All of us have the capacity to experience real love. When we see love from this expanded perspective, we can find it in the smallest moments of connection, with a clerk in the grocery store, a child, a pet, a walk in the woods. We can find it within ourselves. Real love comes with a powerful recognition that we are fully alive and whole despite our wounds, or our fears, or our loneliness. It is a state where we allow ourselves to be seen clearly by ourselves and by others. And in turn, we offer clear seeing to the world around us. It is a love that heals. The words of Sharon Salzberg for us today.
Thank you, Reverend Riddell. And I apologize, I meant the reading, not the story for all ages. We'll take a moment now for a meditative interlude, followed by our sermon.
Good morning again, everybody. I'm really so grateful to be with you here today virtually. I had the pleasure of leading worship with you once before when I was studying at Meadville Lombard Theological School, and I'm glad to be back with you together. I'm grateful to Tina Porter for the invitation and for John and Jeremy and the volunteers and staff who've worked to share this service with you online. I hope you'll take the time to share your appreciation for the time and love they're giving to this community to ensure that you are together in new ways as we continue to isolate ourselves for health and safety. I know that you've been hearing from a lot of different ministers and speakers these days, and I was thinking about this as I got ready for today, thinking that I wanted to be sure that I shared something meaningful with you that reflected the needs of the day and the things that I'm called to preach about. You may have heard it said that each minister only has one or two sermons that they just preach over and over and over again in different places with different words and pictures. I asked a large group of colleagues where this saying came from, and I got more different responses than there were people responding. We couldn't come to any consensus, but nobody argued with the idea. So it is said that each minister only has one sermon that they preach over and over and over again. And so here is today's version of my one sermon. One day in a congregation, I served a congregant and I were walking out of a meeting towards our cars. Now, I knew her to be a committed, but often a very anxious person. And just as we got to the door of the church, which is where, of course, all important conversations happen, she said, "You know, Reverend Ian, I hear your voice in my head all the time." I paused for a moment, honestly, a little bit worried. I asked, a little nervous, "What am I saying in your head?" She looked at me and she said, "Breathe. You're telling me to breathe. I was relieved and then grateful that she had heard me saying that to her, reminding her to pause in the midst of whatever was going on and breathe for a moment before going forward with whatever it was. It was definitely a message that had been running through a lot of my preaching and teaching in that congregation. And I spent some time this week looking back at the sermons I've shared with congregations over the past, and I've seen patterns, themes that come back and again, the core ideas of that one sermon, I guess. I preach a lot about being aware of the truth of the world and of listening to the experiences people share about their lives and believing them. I preach a lot about fear of the unknown and choosing to reflect before we react. And I preach about being inspired to new visions of communities built on steadfast faithfulness and kindness. And as I was looking back and seeing these patterns, the thing that I realized is, as I've preached about all of those things and shared about all of the things, what I've been doing when I'm preaching is drawing a picture of what love looks like in practice. And that's what that pause is for after the breath. It's not just a moment to calm down or regroup. It is that. But it's also a moment to imagine, to hear, and then to choose love. We use that word in Unitarian Universalism a lot, love. May love be the spirit of this church, we say, answering the call of love. Love will guide us. Love. And everywhere I look and read, all of my experiences in life tell me that the best way we can live in this world, the way that helps relationship and wholeness and joy and safety and justice flourish, is to choose to encounter each and every person and situation and respond with love. Because this love I'm talking about is not just a feeling, it is an action, it is choice. It is not just romance, but connection. And it's not just for others. Our ability to choose love for others can be nurtured and strengthened by practices that allow us to choose love for ourselves. Not ego-driven narcissism, but compassionate, fierce, forgiving love for our whole selves. So we choose love. That's easy to say, but how do we do that? I think that all of those things I mentioned a little earlier are evidence that we're choosing love. Understanding the truth of the experiences people share about their lives and believing them, doing justice and being humble, being steadfastly faithful and kind. In the late 1970s, psychologist M. Scott Peck wrote a bestseller called The Road Less Traveled. In it, he shared a definition of love that I think underpins all of what I've just said. He said that love is the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth. Love is as love does. Love is an act of will, namely both an intention and an action. It implies choice. We do not have to love. We choose to love. Love is the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth. This is the practice we sing about when we sing or say, "May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be whole. May you be filled. May we be filled." And it's hard enough, I know, to do that regularly for ourselves, for our loved ones, for our closest neighbors. That text grows from the Buddhist metta practice, cultivating loving kindness first for ourselves, then for those closest to us, then for those more removed. But the practice doesn't stop there. It invites us into something more difficult and more transformative. It invites us to cultivate a feeling of loving kindness for someone or some people with whom we are having difficulty or conflict, or who are treating us badly, or who we are treating badly. And that feels like too much to ask, I know, sometimes, especially in these days of conflict. I know how difficult it must feel to hear that you need to respond to those who are actively doing harm with love or loving kindness. But Sharon Salzberg, in her book Real Love, writes, extending loving kindness towards others, even those we may not know or like, doesn't make us into pushovers, but stronger and more authentic versions of ourselves. All of the teachings we encounter in so many traditions and practices about loving your enemy, about sharing loving kindness with those who have hurt you or who you hate, of affirming and promoting the inherent worth and dignity of every person. All of this is not about forgiving bad behavior or ignoring evil or oppression or abuse. It's not about ignoring boundaries or avoiding conflict. It is not about failing to speak hard truths. It is about refusing to see the person in front of you as a monster, as not human, as categorically separate from you or your humanity. My colleague Patrick McLaughlin wrote that when we call people who do horrible things monsters, we amputate the people we see as monsters from humanity so that we don't have to see the humanity in them and the inhumanity in us. Refusing to reject others as monsters is not about instant forgiving or ignoring wrong done. It's not a choice against resisting evil and oppression and abuse. We can choose to do those things. We must choose to do those things. But making demons out of others is not the way to do it. And we don't choose love in these situations for the sake of the other only, but our own sake as well. First, so that in humility we never forget that we are each capable of dark things. And second, so that we do not degrade our own connection and wholeness by allowing ourselves to hate. And so we choose to respond in love. If I look at what's happening through the eyes of love, writes Sharon Salzberg, how would I tell this story? This story about myself, this story about my family member, the story about that politician. Erich Fromm's The Art of Loving, which grounds itself in Peck's work, among others, inspired Sharon Salzberg. Fromm writes, genuine love is an expression of productiveness and implies care, respect, responsibility, and knowledge. It is not an affect in the sense of being affected by somebody, but an active striving for the growth and happiness of the loved person, rooted in one's own capacity to love. Love, experienced thus, is a constant challenge. It is not a resting place, but a moving, growing, working together. In the midst of change and growth, we choose love again and again. I'm not just talking about big picture love here. I really do mean choosing love in each and every daily moment, in small encounters at the grocery store or the bank, or in email or Zoom meetings these days. It's an everyday kind of choosing. We Unitarian Universalists don't spend a lot of time these days focused on what happens to us after we die. We know that whatever happens, though, it will happen to all of us. That's our universalism right there. We tend to be focused, we UUs, on the here and now. We call ourselves a this worldly faith, in contrast to other worldly faiths. And paying attention to the day-to-dayness of living life in community, in relationship with ourselves and others, can seem like it reduces everything to the mundane, taking away the grandeur of this love that so many have written and sung and painted and danced about for thousands of years. But it is the need to return to the central things each day in each and every moment that makes them possible and makes them beautiful. Love doesn't just sit there like a stone, wrote Ursula Le Guin. It has to be made, like bread, remade all the time, made new. We are not called to make one grand choice and then coast on that for the rest of our time. We are called to feed each other daily with bread, with love, with truth, with what we need to live and thrive together. Now, I am a knitter, and that practice is a lens I often use to look at the world. I've been knitting for more than 10 years now, and over the past couple of years, my life as a knitter has taken on a focus of knitting socks. I will admit, I'm obsessed. Why, of all the glorious things I could be making, sweaters and hats and blankets and scarves and shawls, why socks? Which rarely get seen, which get dirty so easily or get full of holes so easily. Why socks? Well, first of all, I don't live in a sweatery climate. I'm here in Palm Springs, California, where it rarely gets cold enough for sweaters. But here's another important thing. Stephanie Pearl McPhee, a writer and knitting guru, in her book Knitting Rules, talks about knitting socks for her husband, who doesn't really like fancy socks, which, by the way, are much, much more interesting to knit. And her husband is just going to wear them out and need new ones, she says. And she says this: when those socks are done, they'll appear ordinary, except that they're not. They are hours of my life, each one spent on him. He'll pull them on like they're run-of-the-mill footwear. They'll walk with him as he goes through his day, every day, until they wear out. And then others will take their place. Those also knit by me. It's this extraordinary ordinariness that makes socks special. That something as humdrum as socks could be elevated by love and then walked on. It speaks to a certain magnificence. The truth about socks is that they're humble and beautiful and noble, and in their lowness, they are the highest form of art. Elevated by love and then walked on. Elevated by love and then used. Elevated by love. We are elevated by the love we choose to share with ourselves and each other. Our hearts are lifted, our relationships more meaningful and saving, our commitments more supported, and our lives more connected and whole. I know the world is bruised and bleeding, wrote Toni Morrison. And though it is important not to ignore its pain, it is also critical to refuse to succumb to its malevolence. When we choose love, we refuse to succumb to the malevolence we can see around us and in our own hearts. When we choose love, we break the illusion that we're separate from each other. We break the illusion that we are unworthy. We break the illusion that we are superior in any way. When we choose love, we acknowledge the realization that we are all in this together. Now, just as ministers have one sermon, I think each of us human beings, we all have stories that we keep coming back to over and over again. Perhaps because they sustain us like daily made bread, or comfort us for the work of the day like the socks we buy or make. I bet you have a story that you come back to in times of stress, in times of joy, something you read every year at Christmas or over the summer, story that fills you up and you keep coming back to. This story I'm going to share is one I have over and over and over again encountered, and which has become central to my understanding of the work we're called to in the world. I'm not sure exactly where it comes from. My source for the story just says it's a Hasidic tale, but I've been challenged about that in the past. Wherever it's from, it has been my life and my heart for a long time, and it goes like this. There once was a great and beloved rabbi. Students came from far and wide to learn and grow with this wise and compassionate elder. One day, the rabbi asked the gathered students a question, a very important question in Jewish ritual and tradition. How can you tell if it is day or night? How can you tell if dawn has come? Well, one student spoke and asked, is it when you see a tree in the distance and you can tell whether it's a date tree or a fig tree? No, said the rabbi. Another asked, is it when you can see an animal in the distance and you can tell whether it's a dog or a goat? No, said the rabbi again. Increasingly frustrated, another student asked, well, then how can you tell? Well, the rabbi responded, it is when you look into the face of the person in front of you and know that they are your kin. If you cannot see this, the rabbi concluded, it is still night. Be kind to one another and the whole world, my friends. In the face of the chaos and malevolence and wonder of the world, choose love. Each day, like bread, like socks. Renew it in each moment. When in doubt, choose love. May it be so.
Thank you, Reverend Riddell. I realize Reverend Riddell did not get a proper introduction, and he deserves one, so better late than never. Reverend Riddell, for the benefit of, so we know who we've been listening to, is an assistant minister at the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Desert in Rancho Mirage, California. He served as Minister of Music and Worship Arts at the First Unitarian Church of San Diego for 4 years before relocating to Coachella Valley, with his husband and beloved Russell Terrieres. Before FUUSD, Reverend Ian served as Developmental Minister for the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Las Vegas. He was ordained in August of 2012 after graduating from Meadville Lombard Theological School. Before entering full-time ministry, Reverend Ian served 3 congregations as music director. Now is the time in our service for our offering. We give to remind ourselves of how many gifts we have to offer. We give to remember that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. We give because we believe in music and sacred space. We give with the faith that, together, we have enough. The PayPal link is on the screen, but it is not clickable. A clickable link will be shared in the chat box while the music plays. Thank you again to our music director, Jeremy Jacobson, who amazingly makes even an interlude music a spiritual experience. Please join us now as we sing When Our Heart is in a Holy Place. The words are printed on your screen.
When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we tell our story from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place. is in a holy place. We are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place. When we share the silence of sacred space, and the God of hearts stands within, and we feel the power of each other's faith, then our heart is in a holy place. Then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place. We are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place.
Friends, we close today's service with these words. The Buddha said that hatred will never cease by hatred. It will only cease by love. As we turn our hearts and our minds to our daily lives once again, may those lives be given not to hate, but to love, not to indifference, but to kindness, and not to fear, but to hope. Go in peace, my friends, to love and serve the world.
What song does the cricket sing? What news does the swallow bring? What does lovely boyhood tell? What calls out the wedding bell? What sing? In the air.
Please join us as we extinguish our chalice virtually. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.